welcome, folks, to another episode. How did I say episode? I'm so used to saying what episode. This is not an episode. This is a live stream. So welcome, folks, to the Art of Advocacy. I'm your host, Dr. Sheldon L. Akins. I'm also the host of the Leading Equity Podcast. I'm running 2 shows these days, keeping myself busy, in addition to signing books. And by the way, speaking of books, of course, I got to do it. This show is sponsored by Leading Equity, becoming an advocate for all students. Listen, I have spent the last 2 days. Tuesday and Wednesday, I've been in Salt Lake City. Shout out to those in Salt Lake City, recording the audible version of the book. And listen, as a podcaster, I figured, I jump in there, no big deal. I use teleprompters all the time. I'm used to being on the mic. Literally took me forever. It felt like forever to get through that. And I didn't even finish. I got to go back next week. So we had only scheduled 2 days, and those 2 days were not enough. I am going back next week, and that should be the end. I should be able to finish up the book. So just for those who like audibles, I love audibles, by the way. So for those who like to listen to their books, coming soon, you'll be able to listen to me read Leading Equity, become an advocate for all students. I'm looking forward to that. Shout out to those who are there. I see Maria is here. Welcome, Maria. I see Michelle is here. So excited to hear from Tanya. That must be one of the homies. So what's up? If those who else are out there, feel free to say hello. Say where you're from. Always glad to have you on. Now, I am bringing on a good friend of mine. Tanya Ward Singer is here today. I'm really excited to bring her on. She's been on the show a few times, and she's bringing in the fire. So I'm really excited for that. I'm just going to read a little bit, just a smidget of her bio, maybe a sentence. It depends on how far I go. I went to public school, so we'll see how that goes. Tanya Ward Singer is a keynote speaker, best-selling author, and professional learning leader who helps K-12 educators transform teaching for equity and multilingual student achievement. She has several books as well. And make sure you stay on and listen to the end. Don't be one of those 5-second folks. All right, stay on, because we have some giveaways coming up later on in today's show. Also, make sure you have your questions ready to go as well, because we definitely will be ready to answer those questions. Shout out to Maribeth. Thank you, Maribeth, for joining us today. Now, without further ado, I'm bringing on my good friend, Miss Tanya. Thank you so much, Tanya, for joining us today. How are you doing?
I am doing great, Sheldon. Thank you so much. It is an honor to be here. I appreciate that applause sound. So,
one more time. Okay. I love hitting these buttons, but
I think every teacher needs that. I think at the end of the day, when all the students leave, you just put that on. You just say,
that's a good idea. Like when the students walk in first day of school, just give them hand claps. And I got to give you credit for that one. I might mention it on my next trainer or something like that. But definitely. Look, you have Maribeth. Looks like you have a friend.
Hello, Maribeth Edmonds. Good to see you. And Michelle Gill. Yeah, I see some familiar faces. Really good.
Yes.
So thank you.
I briefly read. I read one sentence. Maybe two. I did two. I did 2 sentences on your bio. So obviously I know who you are, but for those, and Maribeth apparently knows, and Michelle as well know who you are, but for those who are watching who are not familiar with Tanya Ward Singer, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you currently do.
Well, I am a lifelong learner. I'm just going to put that out there, because that is what drives me to lead professional learning and to be in the learning profession. There is never a dull moment. I love to learn, right? Yeah. So I went from becoming a teacher to a coach and working in schools, and realized that my sweet spot is leading professional learning. I love supporting teachers and administrators in the really ambitious goal of ensuring that every K-12 student has equal access to high-level literacy and learning. A lot of people know me for my work, EL Excellence Every Day. I definitely have the multilingual, if people go by the EL term, I use the term ML, multilingual learner, is one hat I wear a lot. but I was a literacy specialist before that. And I think in terms of core teaching, how do we help core classrooms be equitable, inclusive spaces for all kids, not just to be there, but to be thriving with high level, intellectually rich, relevant learning.
I love that. And I love that you started off with the lifelong learner part, because that's, if you're an educator, I hope so. I hope that that's what you are about, you're a lifelong learner. Because if you're not, I hate, well, I was going to say something. I forgot we were live for just a moment.
Speaking truth. I like truth talk.
Because there's teachers that literally would teach the same thing for the last 30, 40 years. Like, they don't change anything up. They got it memorized, and they don't switch anything up. And so, like, if you are a lifelong learner, you're willing to adjust to your classroom dynamics, because every classroom is not going to look the same. Your students' demographics change over time. And so you want to make, like you said, you want to make sure that the content is relevant. So, I appreciate where this is starting. So I'm going to ask you my first question, because when we talk about the relevancy and being a lifelong learner, what makes professional development like meaningful? How would you define that?
Well, I mean, really bringing from the work in the field and the research, we know, I mean, just pick up any research, whether it's looking at the learning forward work or everything that comes out around what is effective. It has to be job embedded, right? That doesn't mean you were forced to go to a workshop through your job. It means it's connected to the classroom. That it is, teachers are actively engaged in learning in ways that are relevant to the teacher, what the teacher is charged with doing every day. So relevant professional learning for a teacher is connected to a teacher's call to action. And where I like to enter, where I find the most motivating place, and for me, what matters, it's not just about the teacher, it is about the student. Yes. But I find that when we focus on, here's a question I like to ask. I'll just ask this right now. Anyone who's heard me present has heard this before, right? But if this year, and we're starting a new year, hooray for a new year. We lost a lot of educators last year. It was a very hard year. So everyone who's back, who's staying in it, here's the key question. If you can change one thing in terms of students, if you can have one impact where at the end of the year, when you walk through classrooms, if you're a leader, or if you're a teacher, when you see your kids, what is a shift that you're going to see from the beginning to the end that is going to bring tears to your eyes? Where you think, I love this job.
Yes.
I'm coming back. So I ask that question and I have people write it down. And then if we're in person, they do a turn and talk. If we're on the Zoom, we put it in the chat. But we need to look at those goals. And then we need to notice what they are. What is exciting? Oh, yay, Lisa's writing. Thank you in the comments. Connect with each. Let them know they're a genius, right? And then it's
absolutely
really part of the work for leaders especially is to make a clear distinction between the means and the ends. So the end is the student goal. My question was about students. Often, initiatives for professional learning are not about the students. They are, teachers will differentiate. Teachers will implement this with fidelity. Don't get me started on that, right? Teachers will do X, Y, and Z. And so for a teacher, and especially for a long-time professional teacher who's been in the profession a long time, it becomes demoralizing because you're constantly being told this little piecemeal thing of what to do without someone standing side by side, shoulder to shoulder with you, looking at kids and saying, wait, I get it. You want students to read a complex text and think critically beyond the page, have an opinion, and feel comfortable and confident enough in classroom to express their opinion and justify it with evidence. You know what? I want that too. How do we make that happen? And when we design professional learning from that point, it is relevant.
So it's a backwards design, right? So
absolutely.
Got
right?
you.
Because then the next question, for those who like to take notes and think about where you're going, you backwards design. You then think, if that's my goal for students, and I mean all students, okay?
Right.
Because sometimes I come in, they want, districts want a training. How do we support our multilingual learners? So they're already coming with that lens. But I ask, for all students, what do you want to see? And when I say all, I mean multilingual learners. Because what I don't want is a goal that's set only for multilingual learners. Like, I want them to do well on the English proficiency assessment. Okay, I get that. But like, a unifying goal is we really should have higher expectations for our multilingual learners beyond the English proficiency assessment. That's part of it. And I want them to be active participants as scholars in learning high-level math that I'm teaching, right? And reading. So I'm really about content access.
Okay, just so I'm clear, because this is what I think I heard. So I'm going to repeat back what I think I heard. So it sounded like, obviously, I mean, I know that, multilingual is your specialty. That's kind of your bread and butter, in addition to, professional development. But it sounds like when a school or a district brings you in to discuss or work with the multilingual teachers and things like that, you still ask a question that's so broad that says, no, not just my multilingual students, but all of your students. What does that look like? What by the end of the year, where do you want your kids to come from? Can I ask you, why do you not just single or just focus on the multilingual in that question? Why do you go from a more of a broader scope?
Well, it's a good question. And I think it has to be a yes and. We do have to look specific. We have to disaggregate our data, and we have to look at multilingual learners, migrant education, right?
Mhm.
Look at Indigenous students, Black boys, girls, Latinx, right? We need to look at our data. So it is absolutely important to focus in terms of equity, to understand where are there disparities, where are there the historic inequities that are built into our system, where are those continuing to get inequitable results, and where do we change? So I'm not saying all to erase looking clearly at the distinction. So I'm glad you asked that question. And when I talk about goals for kids, I am trying to disrupt the idea that the multilingual students are the responsibility of the multilingual learner department. The special ed students are the responsibility of the special ed department. Oh, we hired an equity administrator. That's the person who does equity PD. Meanwhile, our literacy leader isn't doing equity PD. So this is why I talk about silos to synergy. So when I get all the leaders in the room, especially, I ask that question. Because I ask the question back to the kids. If you could change one thing, what do you most want to see? Right? And if they start from the means, not the ends, they're not going to be able to talk to each other. They can talk to each other, but it's like we're speaking different languages. The literacy person's talking about this adoption. The math person's talking about these specific mathematical practices, right? It seems very different. But if you talk about kids and are willing to look at those goals and then ask, where's the synergy? Where's the synthesis? What do we have in common? Because even though you're a different content area and maybe I'm focusing on equity, so I'm going to ask these questions, but I'm going to ask that you're focusing on math. Guess what? You want to raise achievement in math? You need to pay attention to the kids who are not currently performing. Are we not meeting the needs of our Black males in math? Why? What data do we need to gather, right? What data do we need to gather? We notice, there's some exclusionary practices going on in terms of kids who are proficient in 5th grade are not getting into the right class in 6th grade. What's happening? So we have to look at that data. But if we're in separate silos, and when you add, it's not just a silo, there's a power imbalance.
Yeah.
So I was
blame.
Right? It's like, you do equity.
People get blamed. Yeah.
You do
the equity person's not doing their job. The special ed is not doing their job. The multilingual is not doing their job. So you're talking from more of a team approach, which is what should happen at a school. You would think a no-brainer, yet how often do we see that happen? Where it's like, okay, this is and I've said this before. when I was special ed director, you know what? One of the questions that I used to hate the most was when teachers would ask me, "Is this one of your kids?" And I would just be like, "No, this is your kid. They're in your class as well. Like, it's not my students. It's all of our students." But when you have that approach where it's like, "Oh, this kid is, oh, they have an IEP, or does this kid have an IEP? Is this one of yours?" And I'm like, "No, it's all of ours. Yes, it's one of mine, but it's yours as well." You know?
And let me just, to my point of lifelong learner and to model humility and humble learning, which is part of
Yeah.
it, teaching is hard. I remember when I was very first brand new teacher, I mean, I was struggling, in every way.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
came in to make it exciting and, free the children from oppressive school. And, I had kids standing on the table and I needed a little bit of help. I didn't have all the tools I have now. So I like to help teachers with a lot of humility. But I remember I had many kids who got pulled out to go with Mr. Robinson, right? For special ed. And I do remember thinking, I'm glad he's helping meet their needs. It's that like when you're overwhelmed, the feeling that like, okay, different people are getting taken care of, right? Which I want to name is also that not taking full ownership, which is what we need to do as teachers, and to acknowledge that some of what's in the room is overwhelm. And if the data on burnout and turnover isn't enough, look at that data, right? So coming in with respect for teachers professionalism, and for the fact I've never met a teacher who didn't want to make a difference for kids. I've met many administrators who told me when I propose what we're going to do, oh, our teachers are not going to go for that, right? I think there's going to be some pushback.
Yeah.
But I find when you start with what do you want to see happen for kids? When I can connect side by side and acknowledge it's not easy. Let's set a goal that is ambitious, that we care about. I'm not always for the SMART goal that's like quick, easy, and turns around quickly. Sometimes the goal that matters most is hard to reach, and you're not going to get that gain, right? You're not going to get that like numerical gain. Often the goal that matters most, it's not quantified unless you create a rubric, right? So yeah, so creating a culture, part of back to your question, about deep professional learning, how to make it meaningful, relevant. We need to have a culture of humility. And it is in that culture where we can really dream for equity and not just play it safe and go, oh, because people, when they start blaming the kids, sometimes that also comes from this sort of the way that policies can sometimes be punitive for teachers on test scores, right? So it's like, we're going to blame teachers. Teachers are going to blame the kids, right? And so we need to be at a place where we look at the data. We say, okay, this particular group of students is disproportionately underserving, right? And let's say we're talking about black students in math, right? And boys specifically, right? That moment of looking at data is where confirmation bias in all of our human brains is going to make or break what happens. I'm not even talking, right? I'm not even talking about racial bias yet. I'm just talking about confirmation bias, right? So we know what this one is, right? Whatever theory, we all do it. We all do it. It's how brains are work. So it's like, whatever theory I have, I'm going to see the data that supports that theory. Like when I think this is definitely the way to drive to this place, I don't need my GPS. And I'm just cruising along. I don't notice the data that's telling me I'm wrong until I get there and I'm in the wrong place. So when students are underperforming, and now I am entering race into the conversation, right? There are biases, racial biases going on. That's the pivotal moment. That is the pivotal moment. Do I blame and refer? Oh, that's because this kid has an IEP? Go to so-and-so. That's because this kid's an English learner? Send him to the so-and-so, right? That's because the parent. Right now we enter whole judgments of communities. Yeah. Or do I say, wow, not meeting this kid's needs. What can we change to get a different result? That's the pivotal moment. So the optimal place to bring people in professional learning is to that moment. And it cannot be done in a workshop. It can only be done by setting a goal we care about, planning together, getting in classrooms or bringing data together, looking together. So when we see the disproportionality, we can be together, not blaming each other. We're not competing for whose students perform better. I know that's what's happening beyond school to school, state to state. That's what's happening. But in our school, we are a team. We're solving, we're changing history. So let's create a culture where it's okay to not have all the answers and to keep asking, what do we need to do?
Where it's okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. Exactly. You know, it's you are first of all. Hold on, one more. You're spitting some games tonight. I hope folks are taking notes because I know I darn sure have been taking notes myself. You know, you are spitting some serious game with this because again, I've been in special ed and I know how things can get. You know, let's just blame the special ed teacher or and I've been on the other end where it's like I'll have students that are, especially when I was first getting started, and like you said, man, I kind of glad that this child is going to get that support that they need because I don't know how to help them. So for other teachers that are out there, especially like our brand new teachers or teachers who just been in situations where it's like, man, I really want to help this child, but I don't know what to do. And we do have a specialist that is supposed to be there to support them. How do we create, I don't know, that team effort? Should the teacher reach out to those specialists, or like what would you suggest in these type of situation where teachers really are trying to do the best, they just don't know really what to do, and then but there's a specialist there, and so like what would you suggest?
That is such a good question, right? That's $1 million question. And it's twofold, right? So the specialists are important, right? And I've worked in that role. So thank you to the specialists. This is like where you need to sometimes provide those different levels of support and intense support. And like with newcomer students, hooray for newcomer class, right? So yes, and the reality is no matter how many specialist services are going on, the student is spending the majority of the time with that core teacher that you're describing, who's reaching out and saying, help me. Right.
Yeah.
So yes, they can reach out to this if the specialist has actual time in their schedule to be in a coaching supportive role. That's ideal. And so, I mean, I work structurally with districts on looking at that. How are we using our personnel to best support and help us move forward with these specific challenges and goals? So that is one piece. It's not fair to take a specialist whose schedule is completely blocked serving students and then say, your job is also to build capacity of the entire staff. And bless all the specialists out there who are taking that on. And I work with a lot of them. And that's how I got into professional learning, as a reading specialist and then a bilingual specialist. And then I was like, I like doing PD. So that's why if there's going to be a training, for example, on being effective with close reading and writing with evidence, let's address how to differentiate in that context, right? Some of the best district partners I work with, they're doing incredible work where the specialists, and there might be a teacher on special assignment at the district level or administrator working across departments. So math and EL is one example. Let's add special ed. Collaborating to do the math PD. So the math PD has taken up a certain amount of time, but we need to integrate and connect what kind of differentiation is needed to reach all kids. Because it doesn't work to say, okay, math department gets this many days of PD or, this afternoon and that half of whatever PD day. And then someone needs to come in, like the EL person needs to come in and do a 2-hour sit and get on random strategies for EL students. And now the special ed person, okay, you've got an hour with the whole staff. Go teach them how to, and then guess who's stuck doing all the synthesizing? The overwhelmed classroom teacher. Or as I want to give credit to my husband here, who is a fabulous classroom teacher. Shout out to my husband. He says, every training that I go to, the trainer acts like this is the most important thing. I'm sure teachers can relate to that, right? So we, in our design, the more we align and collaborate, that gives us as leaders, as coaches, the opportunity to go deep. So it's not just up to that one teacher, back to your question, that one teacher who's like, how do I reach out? How do I get help? Yes, reach out, advocate, and get help. And systemically, we should make sure that staff meeting time, any collective time, collaborative time is being used to support teachers in the very challenging task of having clarity about what to expect, engaging kids, observing kids, adapting instruction.
I love it. Okay. And let's shout out to Lisa. Lisa has a good comment. Trainings are great for the
Yes, and chocolate, right?
Good job, Lisa. Training is good for the free food. Okay, no, but in all fairness and all seriousness, I want to ask you this question because when it comes, because special education, multilingual education, that's equity, right? Those are equitable type of trainings. And one of the things you mentioned in early on in some of your comments was regarding all these different silos, and then the equity person comes in and has to do their diversity, equity, inclusion type of trainings and things like that. And I have been really thinking about that, especially with our culture and political climate and all these things. I just feel like sometimes just saying the word equity can trigger so many people in regards to teachers and parents and community members and things. They hear the word equity, but special education is an equitable program. Multilingual learners, that's equity. But as soon as you say it, it's an issue. Here's a question that I want to throw out to you, because I am a strong proponent that sometimes we do try to, like you said, we put so many boxes and so many silos, and I would love to see more equity or equitable practices embedded into your teaching in general, right? Rather than having to spell out, okay, guys, this is the equity section of our training, or today we're going to do some equitable work. No, it should just be every day. Like if you're saying that I'm a school leader and I'm an equitable school leader, I'm about, culture responsiveness and all those kind of things. To me, that should just be a daily practice as opposed to it just being a silo. Now, I do believe that there are certain terms or I don't know, traits of personality or characteristics that really do need to be harnessed and really need to be specific. But I think a lot of the PD in general needs to be embedded. Equity needs to be embedded. So my thoughts, or my question to you, is kind of like, what are your thoughts when it comes to surface level equity? How do we maybe go beyond that? What are your thoughts there?
That's a good question. First, I just want to respond to what you shared. It's just
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
it's a yes and, right? It's a yes and. So when I'm talking about integrating and connecting, my bias is very, very heavily in education, my education work on practice to impact student learning, right?
Yeah.
That's not the whole picture on equity. So doing some important equity work, and even let's have a conversation about why equity is triggering. Let's have that conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And let's create the space to talk about what's going on, because it's bringing up a lot of fears by design, right? So there's conversations to have and there's community to build that aren't going to, that's not going to neatly fit in with your training on math, right? It needs its own space,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So I want to just be sure I'm not saying to not also do those trainings. I'm just saying, like, we have to be very intentional that equity work doesn't just live as the theoretical place, right? And the mindsets, that we then take the mindsets to practice. And I think that is actually, to your question, how we go deep. Okay. I'm not going to get into all the work I do outside of K-12, which is extremely deep on inside out work. I want to keep on this thread of K-12 because it all relates. We have to create the place where we can be humble, be embodied, be in it, be reflective, period, no matter what we're doing. In schools, we need to connect it to practice, because if we just sit here and talk equity, we can perform the equity conversation. But when we say, okay, this is where the theory becomes reality. When someone says, I can't teach that, my kids can't do that. Okay, tell me about that. So this is why I'm a huge fan of what I wrote about in my first book, which is a book I'm going to give away, Opening Doors to Equity. That book is about collaborative, job-embedded professional learning, where we plan together and actually step into classrooms together. That's not the only way. That's kind of I will say the biggest ask. So if you want to talk about deep, that's deep. We get time as professionals to set a goal that matters, to collaborate, to teach, and to be humble together in classrooms, not watching each other to compete or judge, watching students to learn more about how they think and how we can adapt our teaching together. It is in that work that I have seen the most shifts in teacher mindsets, not just actions, where teachers say, I didn't believe my kids were capable until we as a team just kept at it and adapting. And now I realize that when I make this shift, it shifts who engages. It shifts how kids learn. That's deep.
That's deep. That's deep. And I've heard it too. You know, my kids can't do that. So I give them less rigorous type of work. I can't give them that type of, they can't read that book. I remember talking to ELA teachers, say like, okay, why don't you assign some books that are going to be relevant to our students, to their lived experiences. Let's be a little bit more culturally responsible and go a little bit further than your traditional, To Kill a Mockingbird and Shakespeare's and all that stuff. Let's go a little further than that. And they'll tell me stuff like, well, my kids, I don't think the students can read that. And I'm just looking at them with a face like, are you serious right now? You don't think that they can read that, but they can read Shakespeare? No one even speaks like that no more. Like, so why are we still teaching these things like that? So what is your typical response, Tanya? I mean, I know you said that you have teachers that have said, I've changed my stance, but what is your typical reaction in those situations?
Well, it depends on the where and the why, but I was really happy one time. I was in a conference presentation and I had K-12 in the room, right? And I had my training was designed with examples across all the grades. And I had somebody, I forget what I was sharing about, a high level open-ended conversation, kids building up ideas together. And I had somebody maybe in secondary, I forget which grade, say, no, that's not possible with my kids, trying to now qualify who their kids are. The next video on my slide was first graders doing that. So I was like, thank you for the segue. I showed that.
Thank you.
And we talked about it. So that's one. But I think the other piece is, and this is where humility comes in and being a side-by-side learner with teachers. I really think we're way more effective as principals, coaches, administrators, leaders of professional learning if we're willing to say, okay, let me try that with your students. And yeah,
let me try that with your student. So that's a great response. Let me try that with your student.
I do it. I was happy. I was demoing with this group of third grade teachers I was working with. And I said, okay, here's how I recommend doing it. And the teacher said, that's not going to work. We tried that, didn't work. And I was like, okay, tell me about what didn't work. Like, I gathered information, right? This is not a competition. This is a collaboration, right? So tell me what didn't work. And then I go, okay, well, I have an idea of what might work. How about if we try it? And every time, when I do a demo, it's not like, here's a demo, copy me exactly. This is what you have to do forever. Yeah. It is, I am going to teach. So we have a moment to watch students and then we are going to reflect, right? Because we have to model that teaching isn't performance. Teaching is trying to have an impact, gathering information, having a relationship, right? So it's humbling to go in and do a demo lesson and for things not to go as planned. But the first time that happened to me, the teachers told me it was the best demo ever because they saw me stop, look at them and say, everything we talked about is changing right now. And I adapted in the moment. They see people come and sort of do a pre-polish, and, to that point, principals and school districts need to create a culture where teachers are not just performing the easiest thing when you walk by. Where teachers, And it's the feedback principals give is part of it, which is why I work with principals on this as well. Because you can say risk taking is good, take risks, blah, blah, blah. But if you're coming back through classrooms and, you see an imperfect moment in the classroom, do you ask a question that encourages the teacher to reflect, that allows the teacher to share their professional perspective on what just happened? Or is it, you have to be on step 3 of.
So a lot of principals will have, okay, as a former principal, I know there's pressure when it comes to scores and tests and all those things, and accountabilities, and you want to be on point. So I think, like you said, some of it's just a little bit of lip service. Oh yeah, you have the freedom, flexibility to do what you got to do, as long as like the yes and, like you were saying before, it's like you need to, I'll give you that flexibility and freedom, but when I walk into your classroom, I want to see this and that, or those test scores need to be here or they need to be there because of those pressures. And it's to me, it's hard to balance. Just being a former leader, it sometimes it can be a little hard to balance. But I hope that you're having those kind of conversations with those school leaders about, I hear what you're saying, but the action that I'm seeing doesn't necessarily reflect what you were just saying.
Well, and to be super clear, where I find what helps with the balance is I use this analogy with a GPS. You use a GPS. What do you type in the GPS?
Put in your location that you're trying to go.
Right? Yeah. But what if you type in the GPS Prius, and then someone else types, some other Chevy, and then we have a debate. You need the Chevy, needs the Prius, right? So it's like, if I'm the principal, I'm under pressure to make sure everyone's driving a Prius, and I'm coming through and saying, where's your Prius? We have a problem because there's no redirect. A GPS is broken if you're putting in the car type. But if you put in the destination, which is student learning, it's fine. So let me give you a very concrete example. I do a lot of work with schools on structuring conversations, creating more active engagement from sit and get to kids talk to each other, right? So with principals, I want you looking for who's talking. Are kids talking to each other? Students. Sometimes people will interpret. I teach a strategy, like a sentence frame is one way to support language in a conversation. And I'll come back and the principals are like, we're making sure every teacher has sentence frames on the wall. And now they're coming in and they're looking for the sentence frame. So that's something that I reframe, pun intended, sorry, that I reframe and say, okay, a sentence frame is something you choose or you lose. But the goal is that students are engaged in conversation, better yet, high-level conversation about that text to make meaning, about the math to make meaning. They're building relationships. So you're watching for what students are doing. And you're also building capacity for teachers to focus on what students are doing. Because if we collectively agree that the sentence frame is the goal, we can then say, I did the sentence frame and they didn't talk. Which is like saying I taught and they didn't learn, right? So focus on the distinction of the ends and the means. We want to keep our focus on the students. And yeah, the balance is hard, but I'm not saying it's a free for all, let teachers do whatever they want. I'm also saying, hey, we don't want it to just throw away this whole year for these kids. Like, let this be intellectually rich and relevant, and let me help you create that environment and help you make that happen.
I love this. Okay, and shout out to Dr. Scott. He said it perfectly. I lost it. There it is. Tanya has brought her own thunder and lightning this evening. Wonderful session. Thank you for that. This is perfect. I am thoroughly enjoying and learning so much. I've had Maribeth says I've had success when bringing in co-teaching teams to help build training with me and then deliver the workshops for their colleagues across grade levels. Awesome. Nice. Oh, and then Michelle says she's going to be using the GPS analogy. So that's good stuff there. Now, let me ask you this, Tanya, because most schools, I don't know, maybe there are some schools that started back already. But I would say majority in the United States, at least, the majority of schools have not come back to school yet. If I'm a professional development person, if I'm a person who's in charge of procuring those professional development sessions or the calendar, whatever it is, right? And thinking about what that could look like for the 22-23 school year. What are your I guess what are your thoughts on just kind of considerations that they should make when choosing or selecting those type of professional development opportunities?
Well, definitely you want to look at the professional learning standards and know professional learning design. That's big. You know, first of all, I mean, I'm surprised if people right now are making those decisions. A lot of those decisions are made
Yeah.
in the fall. I mean, they're made in the
Sure.
spring, right?
Sure.
They're made, like, I know the work I do with districts.
It's a brand new principal. Let's just assume it's a brand new principal. They just took the role or
brand new principal. Well, you know, because you've been there. Listen to teachers, listen to your, learn your community, build relationships. I will say for principals especially, and this hopefully, mentors and support, and hopefully your district is a strong support of helping you make this happen. The precious time that you have with teachers, really ask yourself, what can just go in a written communication and what is going to happen in this time? A staff meeting is optimally not a time for just one-way delivery of information. So it's looking at, okay, I have this many staff meetings in the year. I have a whole bunch of, policies and mandatory things I have to build in, right? Then look, how much time is feasibly left that I can do professional learning embedded in the staff meeting? Even something as simple like when I work with people with my book, EL Excellence Every Day, which is really about differentiating academic literacy for all kids. It's relevant to everyone. When we're looking at, for example, the engage strategies. Oh, look at that beautiful coffee stain. Well-loved book. For example, if our goal is to get teachers to structure student-to-student conversations, right, which are so important on so many levels, and especially now, helping kids connect, feel seen, feel heard. Me, as a site level administrator, no matter what my agenda is in my staff meeting, I can use those strategies in my staff meeting, right? Maybe we have to talk about bloodborne pathogens, right? Like, there's something I have to talk about. That's not what I really want to talk about, but I'm going to talk. So I'm going to have people, or we're talking about dismissal bell, or we have to make a collective decision about something as a staff. Use the same strategies that you're asking teachers to use with kids, especially the conversation ones, because really they're effective meeting strategies. So that's one easy kind of low-hanging fruit. But even with that, it's interesting. I had a principal say, well, I can't do that. I don't have time. And I just kind of paused and I went, we had all the principals for the district there. I was like, okay, I appreciate your honesty with that statement. Reflect. Have you heard teachers say that? And there was this, oh. So it was an empathy building moment. Teachers also feel they don't have time.
Yeah.
So the shift is, let me help you in your precious limited time, shift from calling on individuals and asking people to raise their hand, which is kind of a time consuming thing, to even a turn and talk, right? So when they can slowly see how it connects.
Loving this. Okay.
Talk. Look at all these great comments.
Shout out to Ayadeli. My man Ayadeli, thank you so much. I think he has a good question here. Is there a difference between professional learning and professional development?
That's a good question. Those are both phrases that get used by so many people to mean so many different things. That, at least, I don't know about what's your experience, Sheldon. I experienced they get used interchangeably. I know Learning Forward definitely made that big push, to go professional learning. I try to only use professional learning in my phrasing, but let's be honest, PD, it's so snappy.
It's very common. Short. It's very common.
I keep saying PD. Yeah. So, if I had to make a distinction and start from scratch, I would do professional learning to include job embedded. But the reality is, it's kind of like the terms in multilingual learner, English learner, multilingual learner. Terms
Yeah.
change, and everyone's picking a different thing, and it means different things to different people. Isn't language exciting?
So this is my opinion. Okay, when I hear professional development, I automatically think about a whole school wide type of training or a whole organizational type of training. When I think of professional learning, I think more individual or more maybe it's compartmentalized, something like that. So maybe professional learning for our English teachers or professional learning for here. Professional development, I typically think of it more on a larger scale. But again, that's my opinion. But I think overall, professional development seems to be more the common, uh, especially in education. People say PD all the time. You don't see a lot of professional learning or PLs as much, except for like maybe PLCs. But besides that, no, I don't hear it a lot. But that's a really good question, folks. If you got an answer, please put that in the chat because I don't pretend to know everything when it comes to equity. So and I think that's a really good question. So folks who do have their thoughts, put it in the chat. I'd love to bring that up as well.
I'm going to leave with
Now,
that question and ask a bunch
yeah,
of people now. I'm really curious.
yeah, yeah,
I'm curious. That's a great question.
yeah. I agree. Now you have you want to talk about the giveaways. We're going to wrapping things up. So if folks have some questions, put them in the chat. But I also want to give Tanya a chance to mention what you have going on.
Oh yeah, we want to give away some books. My publisher
Yeah.
Corwin Press has agreed to give away some books, but to do this, I need you to fill out a little form. It just gives me your name and email. The email you'll see, and then I will do a random selection right here live on the live stream. And when you fill out that form, you have a choice to decide if you win. Do you want me to read just your first name, last name? You can decide, or just initial. But I'll read the winners on the chat, of course, keeping your email private. And I'll just follow up email with the folks who win. So if you want to enter the book giveaway, if you're on
Thank you for
live,
that.
your odds should be pretty good. Oh, it's for opening doors to equity, excellence every day.
Yep. I think Virginia has a good answer here. She says some PD has come to mean sit and get unrelated training, whereas professional learning has come to mean job embedded adult learner centers. It's also seated in collaborative learning and inquiry. Thank you for adding that in, Virginia. Ayadeli also is asking, is there a way to differentiate between PD that is for the development of educators as people versus for teaching practices that impact instruction? And then
That's a good question.
he has some good questions, man.
Right. No, that's a good question. I mean, that just, I don't have time to go into the work I'm doing in coming to the table, but that's all about lifelong learning, and it's like, where are we, whether it is about racism, whether it's about history, whether it's about feelings, right? Permission to feel trauma, understanding trauma, being more compassionate. All these things are really about who we are and how we show up, which does affect teaching and learning, but it doesn't have that like quick and easy connection. Oh, here's a strategy. Now we have math. Woo. Right. So it's harder, I think, in the school district. It's so teaching and learning focused. But I would agree. It's absolutely imperative, right? Because we know relationships are what matter most, who we are as people. And that commitment to lifelong learning is imperative, helping. I don't know. What do you think, Sheldon, on that question?
I'm an advocate for multiple options for multiple reasons, but so like any type of PD day, or let's say call it PL day, or again, I'm not. That's a really good question, by the way. My thoughts is trying to have various options for folks to choose from, as opposed to that one session or that one training for the day, because sometimes it doesn't always hit everybody's needs, and it's not relevant to everybody. So if you have a time slot for PD, if you can offer 2 or 3 different options for folks to choose from so that they can probably pinpoint better their individual needs. And then also so that kind of cover that differentiation question. And then the other piece to that is creates more buy-in. Because when you're managed, in your school calendar on Friday, October 13th, you know that there's going to be a PD day, and it's just that one thing versus, okay, I know I have PD, however, I have 3 or 4 different options to choose from. Pick one of these or pick 2 of these. To me, it just creates a little bit more buy-in in those opportunities. It's not always feasible to do, but if you can do something like that where you're offering multiple options, that's kind of the way to go. That's why I always encourage.
I love it. Choice. True for teachers,
Choice.
true for students.
Yeah. Maria says, I love professional learning as the participants are engaged. When you consider PD, it generally happens as a requirement. Absolutely. 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 All right. You want to check your giveaway, see where we're at?
Yeah. So it looks like out of all the people here, I only have a few people that input. So I don't know if I need to give another moment or drop the link in the chat. But if you put in tanyasinger.com/win books, we'll do a random generator and then we'll have winners.
Love it. Love it.
Or we may just have to have I'll pick 2 winners. How about that? Are there any more questions?
I'm gonna drop the link in the chat as well, in the comments as well. So just in case folks are having sometimes when you're on your phone or something like that, you're watching. So I'm gonna drop it in here as well. So that is the direct link to the form.
Oh yeah, that works too.
Feel free to click on that and just drop that in. If that's, but yeah, we want some folks to do so that way we can do some random giveaways. So if you've been listening, which obviously if you're here at this point, you've been listening, like Tanya's been bringing the fire. So you definitely want to get your hands on the book. While we're doing that, why don't you tell us a little bit about the books that you have available?
Absolutely. So this is my most recent book. Actually, it's not. I have a collaborative book that's more recent, but I have EL Excellence Every Day is a flip to guide to differentiate academic literacy. And it really helps with mindsets and active engagement of students. And there's a lot of scaffolds in here for teachers to differentiate. If you see this, try this. So it's a lot of helping teachers move from, I tried it and my kids can't, to, oh, okay. So that's that book. The other book is a collaborative book that I wrote with many fabulous co-authors called Breaking Down the Wall. And that is about leading for multi-learner equity and really appeals to multiple levels, teachers and leaders, and looks at policies to practice. And then my first book, Opening Doors to Equity, really empowers leaders, teacher leaders especially, but leaders who want to support professional learning, teacher inquiry, collaboration. It's really about a protocol and an approach to doing it with stories of how I did it in several different districts and for different reasons to personalize it to the location. But then it's a real how-to to go deep and to deepen your professional learning communities. So it's truly inquiry and not just in name. So those are the books. And I'm really excited. Okay, so we just have a few entry points, but I'm going to use this randomizer on my phone.
Okay.
And, or I'll tell you what, Sheldon, do this. It's only a small handful, but we're going to pick 3 winners. So your odds are good. Pick a number between 3
I should fill out this form real quick. I should fill it out so I can get a free book. Shoot, if folks, yeah. But no, seriously, what do you want me to do?
All right, I added you. Oh wait, I can't say that because
I would just regift it. I don't think the host.
Okay, we can't do that. We can't do that because then they'll think it's rigged, especially since you're picking the number. All right, pick a number between 3 and 7.
3 and 7. We're gonna go with 6.
Okay. Maria is a winner. She asked for her first name only. I will email you, Maria, and you get all 3 books. If you already had that, there's going to be 3 winners. I mean, Corwin's feeling generous. There's going to be 3 winners, and each winner gets 3 books. So if you already have the book, give it to your colleagues. Share.
Wait. Just you said all. So each winner gets all 3 books.
I know. Can you believe how generous Corwin Press is for that? I'm just like,
gotta give Corwin some love on that one. Appreciate it. That's what's up.
That's what's up. I know. I was like, hey, can I have a couple books? They're like, oh yeah, how about that? I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. Okay, so pick another number between 3 and 7.
3 and 7. Okay, let's go with 5.
All right. Ginny W is the next winner. All right.
W.
All right, you got one more. It's going to be
congrats.
3, 4, or 7.
4.
All right, Katrina is a winner. Woohoo! We got 3 winners, 3 books. I will email you, and you'll let me know what. I'll either put you in touch with the Corwin person, or make sure that the person who's going to send you the books gets your address, so you get the books. Woohoo! Winners! Thank you.
Shout out to Corwin. Shout out to Corwin, by the way, for that. I've never. I'll be honest. I've never seen that before. But they give away 3 books, so that's.
I know, right? I know.
Congrats.
And then when I ask them again for my upcoming free webinar, and be like, "Can I do that again?" We'll see, right? I might have just spent it all on this one live stream, but hey,
You never heard that. Where was I at? Somewhere. I was somewhere yesterday, and I just asked for something free. And they was like, oh, we already kind of did something for you already. We can't do. I was like, I'm just one of those dudes, man. I'll just ask, can I get something for free and see what happens? So, like,
hey,
you got your webinar coming up, go for it.
Just ask. You can always say no.
Just ask. All right. Well, we're gonna start wrapping up. So, Tanya, I would love, I definitely consider you as providing a voice and leading equity, and I want you to. I would love if you could kind of take us home with some of your final thoughts.
Well, first one, just take a deep breath. Focus on what's going on in your body, what's going on in your life, relationships, and connection to each other. I say that as a parent. This is not just theory about what we know works for kids and schools and communities, but schools are a place where we get to be together. So if we can be together and be real, really be seen, create spaces where everyone can see and hear each other and be in collaboration, even humble and courageous collaboration for kids, it's going to be a great year.
Love it. I love it. It's going to be a great year. And I'm glad that's some really good words of encouragement as we kind of get ready for the school year to start up. If we have folks that want to reach out to you, want to connect with you, what's the best way?
Go to my website. Well, there's a couple ways. Twitter, if you see my name, how it's spelled right there, but you just put an @ and get rid of all the spaces. @Tanya Ward Singer. I'm on Twitter. I see Michelle Gill on Twitter. Tweet that out, right? And then also you can go to my website at tanyasinger.com. Just knock the ward out of there. Sorry, Dad. tanyasinger.com and use the contact form. And that's a way to connect. I just had to say that, man.
Why are you saying
don't get me started on the last 13 generations of my family, but that's a whole nother part of my inside out work. And yeah.
That was good. That was hilarious.
Names have histories.
Well, it was truly a pleasure. Thank you so much, Tanya. It's always great to talk to you. So it's good to reconnect again. Folks, make sure that you go to tanyasinger.com, learn more, especially if you have, and not just if you're an EL or ML individual. I mean, she can support you in your needs as a school building. Again, we're coming from a team effort is the approach that we want to take. So feel free to reach out, grab one of her books. If you didn't win the Corwin giveaway, just make sure you jump on there and grab her work. She does some phenomenal stuff. So thank you again, Tanya, so much.
You're making me blush. And be sure to buy Sheldon's book. Who sponsored this live stream?
which is sponsored by this live stream, as always. You just made me show it. Okay,
Yeah.
there it is. There it is. There it is. But yeah, so definitely support Tanya. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I don't know why I love the claps so much. I know they're kind of corny. I know, but I love them. I got to work on these sound effects. I got to bring some more into the sound effects bank. Let's see, Maria. Shout out to Maria. Thank you, Sheldon. This was my first time attending a session. Make sure, folks, that you are subscribed to the show. Okay, subscribe to the show. I really do enjoy doing this. But we're building up the channel. I mean, obviously I have two shows. I got the podcast, Leading Equity, and then I also have today. I have the art of advocacy. But please subscribe to the show, share it with your friends. Let's build this channel up, and let's get more viewership. And that means a lot for the work that we're doing here. Now, one of the takeaways from today's session, and Tanya definitely brought the fire, but one of my takeaways from this session was, well, actually a few takeaways, was just a team approach. We don't have to operate in silos. This is not the special ed department. This is the ELA department. This is the English department. All these different departments, and we silo things, and we do professional developments just for those areas. But really, we need to work as a team, right? The kids that are in your school aren't SPED kids. They aren't English language learner kids. No, they're all of our kids. Okay, they don't just belong to certain departments. Biggest key takeaways. Another piece that Tanya mentioned was the comments of "my kids can't do that." We got to stop saying that. Okay, that's a deficit mindset. We should be talking from an asset-based approach. Take our kids from where they are. Celebrate that. Okay, our kids are scholars either way it goes. No matter what their backgrounds are, take that as it is and see where we can build from there, as opposed to saying, oh man, these kids are so behind. COVID. Kids lost 2 school years, so they're way behind, or the kids are struggling. Okay, that's not the language that we want to utilize, right? That is a deficit approach. Definitely want to make sure that the things that we are saying are coming from an asset-based approach. Also, make sure if you do have specialists in your class, feel free to reach out to them and ask for their support. Okay. Now, it's not their duty to train you in everything, especially if they have to work with you and all the other classrooms, but at least be willing to reach out when you can. I think those are some of the thoughts that I took away, the notes that I took away from today's session. Again, subscribe to the channel, support the channel, support the Leading Equity Center, support Tanya's work as well. Now, remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But by all means, keep moving. Let's continue to be a voice in leading equity.